Once upon a time, not so very long ago, great European powers were racing across the vast continent of Africa. They called this the Scramble for Africa. It was a time when maps were redrawn, not by the people who lived there, but by kings and queens in faraway lands. They claimed mountains, rivers, and entire kingdoms as their own. But in the heart of this great continent, in the highlands of Ethiopia, a powerful story was unfolding. It is the story of a man who would not let his people be conquered. His name was Menelik II. He was a leader who believed in freedom, unity, and the strength of his nation. He was a lion who roared so loudly that the entire world had to listen. This was an era of great change and great danger. The world was shrinking as steamships and telegraphs connected distant lands faster than ever before. For many nations in Africa and Asia, this meant the arrival of soldiers and governors from Europe who Iwa, Hamburger, and Tandur came to rule. But Ethiopia was different. It had a history stretching back thousands of years, a story woven with ancient kings, deep faith, and a fierce spirit of independence. This was the world Menelik was born into. It was a world where the old ways were being challenged by new, powerful forces. He knew that to protect his people's freedom, he would have to be stronger, smarter, and more united than any emperor before him. Imagine a chessboard, with Africa as the board, and its people as the pieces. Powerful players from across the sea were moving their pieces, capturing territory, and declaring checkmate over ancient kingdoms. In this high-stakes game, Menelik II emerged as a grandmaster. He saw the board with incredible clarity. He understood the motivations of his opponents and the strengths of his own people. He knew that a divided Ethiopia would fall, but a united Ethiopia could stand tall against any challenge. His story is not just about a single battle or a single treaty. It is about a lifetime of dedication to an idea, the idea of a free and sovereign Ethiopia, a beacon of hope for all. His journey was not an easy one. It was filled with moments of doubt, betrayal, and incredible hardship. But through it all, Menelik's belief in his destiny and the destiny of his nation never wavered. He was a visionary who saw a future where Ethiopia was not just a survivor of colonialism, but a modern, powerful nation on the world stage. This is the story of how one leader's courage and wisdom inspired a nation to achieve the impossible. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of hope can shine through. And that, my friends, is a story worth reading. A story worth remembering for all time. Menelik was born with royal blood flowing through his veins. His name at birth was Saleh Mariam, and he was the son of the king of Shewa, one of the most powerful kingdoms within the Ethiopian empire. From a young age, he was surrounded by the stories of his ancestors, great rulers who traced their lineage all the way back to the legendary King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. These stories were not just tales for bedtime. They were lessons in leadership, courage, and the sacred duty to protect his homeland. He grew up learning the art of governance, the traditions of his people, and the skills of a warrior, preparing for the day he would one day rule. But fate had a different, more difficult path for the young prince. At that time, Ethiopia was not fully united. A powerful emperor named Tewodros II was on a mission to bring all the regional kingdoms under his central control. When Menelik was just a boy, Tewodros's army marched into Shewa. In the conflict that followed, Menelik's father died and the young prince was taken captive. He was brought to the emperor's mountain fortress, a place called Magdala. He was no longer a prince in his own court, but a prisoner of a powerful ruler. This could have been the end of his story, a promising life cut short by the harsh realities of power and ambition. For 10 long years, Menelik lived as a royal captive. Emperor Tewodros, however, didn't treat him like a common prisoner. He saw something special in the young man from Shewa. He admired his intelligence and his noble bearing. Tewodros even gave Menelik his own daughter, Altash Tewodros, in marriage. The emperor hoped that this union would tie Menelik to his court forever, making him a loyal part of his new, unified empire. But while Menelik was treated with a certain respect, he never forgot who he was. He was the rightful heir to the throne of Shewa, and his heart longed for his home and his people. During his years in captivity, Menelik learned valuable lessons. He watched Emperor Tewodros closely, studying his successes and his failures. He saw how Tewodros's ambition to unite Ethiopia was a noble goal, but he also saw how his harsh methods created enemies and sowed division. Menelik learned the delicate art of diplomacy, how to build relationships, and how to wait for the right moment. His years as a prisoner were like a long, difficult class in the school of leadership. He was a seed planted in rocky soil, but instead of withering, he was gathering the strength he would need to one day break free and grow into a mighty tree. The walls of Magdala were high, and the emperor's guards were watchful, but they could not contain the spirit of a future king. After a decade in captivity, Menelik knew the time had come to reclaim his destiny. He had been patient, he had been observant, and now, he was ready to act. With the help of a few loyal supporters who had secretly communicated with him, a plan for a daring escape was put into motion. It was a risky gamble. If he were caught, it would mean certain death. But the call of freedom and the pull of his homeland were stronger than any fear. One night, under the cover of darkness, Menelik slipped away from the fortress. His escape was the stuff of legends. He and his small group of followers had to navigate treacherous mountain passes and avoid the emperor's pursuing soldiers. It was a long and dangerous journey back to his home province of Shewa. Every shadow could have hidden an enemy, and every sound could have signaled their discovery. But Menelik's determination was like a compass, guiding him forward. As news of his escape spread, hope began to stir among the people of Shewa. Their long-lost prince was coming home. His return was not just a personal triumph, it was a symbol that their kingdom's spirit had not been broken. When Menelik finally arrived in Shewa, he was greeted not as a fugitive, but as a returning hero. The people rallied to his cause, with overwhelming support. They had been waiting for a leader to restore their kingdom's pride and independence, and in Menelik, they found that leader. He quickly consolidated his power, reclaiming his rightful title as King of Shewa. He was no longer the boy who had been taken captive. He was a man who had endured great hardship and emerged stronger. His experience had given him a deep understanding of power, politics, and the hearts of his people. From his throne in Shewa, Menelik began to look beyond his own kingdom's borders. He remembered the lessons he had learned from Emperor Tewodros. He shared the emperor's dream of a unified Ethiopia, but he knew it had to be achieved through a different path. Instead of conquering his neighbors through force alone, he sought to build alliances through diplomacy, respect, and mutual interest. His time as a prisoner had not made him bitter, it had made him wise. He began the long and patient process of weaving the separate threads of the Ethiopian kingdoms into a single strong tapestry, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. With Shewa firmly under his control, Menelik began the monumental task of nation-building. His vision was clear, a modern, unified Ethiopia that could stand on its own 2 feet in a world of growing empires. He knew that military strength alone was not enough. A truly strong nation needed modern technology, a robust economy, and connections to the outside world. So Menelik embarked on an ambitious campaign of modernization. He invited foreign advisors and engineers to his court, not as masters, but as partners in progress. He was fascinated by new inventions and ideas that could strengthen his country and improve the lives of his people. One of his first priorities was to build a new capital. He chose a spot in the hills of Shewa and named it Addis Ababa, which means new flower. This city was more than just a place for his palace, it was a symbol of his forward-looking vision. He oversaw the construction of roads and bridges to connect the far-flung regions of his expanding empire. He introduced the telephone and the telegraph, allowing for communication that was faster than the swiftest horseman. He also established a national currency, a modern postal system, and the country's first national bank. Each new project was a brick in the foundation of the modern Ethiopia he was building. Menelik also understood the importance of military modernization. While European powers were armed with the latest rifles and cannons, much of the Ethiopian army still used traditional weapons. Menelik used his growing wealth and diplomatic connections to purchase modern firearms from Europe. He carefully stockpiled rifles, machine guns, and artillery. He knew that in order to negotiate with the European powers on equal terms, he had to speak a language they understood, the language of military strength. He was not a warmonger but a pragmatist who understood that the best way to ensure peace was to be prepared for war. As he built up his infrastructure and his army, Menelik also worked tirelessly to expand and unify the empire. Through a masterful combination of diplomacy, strategic marriages, and, when necessary, military campaigns, he brought many southern kingdoms under his rule. This process was complex and sometimes violent, but Menelik's goal was always to create a larger, more cohesive Ethiopian state. He believed that all the diverse peoples within the empire's historic borders were part of a single national family. This unified and modernized empire, forged by his vision and will, would soon face its greatest test. As Menelik consolidated his power and became emperor of all Ethiopia, the so-called scramble for Africa was reaching its peak. The Kingdom of Italy, which was, a relatively new nation in Europe, was eager to build its own colonial empire, and saw Ethiopia as a prime target. They had already established a colony in nearby Eritrea, right there on the coast of the Red Sea. From that vantage point, they looked inland toward the green, fertile highlands of Ethiopia. The Italians approached Menelik, proposing a treaty of friendship and cooperation. Menelik, always a shrewd diplomat, was open to building relationships, but he was also cautious. In the year 1889, Ethiopian and Italian representatives signed the Treaty of Wuchale. The treaty was meant to define the relationship between the two nations, covering trade and diplomacy. It was written in both Amharic, the official language of Ethiopia, and Italian. Menelik signed the Amharic version, believing it was a fair agreement between two sovereign nations. This version stated that the Emperor of Ethiopia used the services of the Italian government to communicate with other European powers, if he so wished. It was, an optional arrangement, a tool of convenience that Menelik could choose to use or not. However, the Italian version of the treaty told a very different story. The translators had deliberately changed the meaning of one crucial article. The Italian text of Article 17 did not say that Menelik used Italy for his foreign relations. It said this subtle but significant change turned Ethiopia, in the eyes of the Italians and other European powers, into a protectorate of Italy. It meant that Ethiopia was no longer a fully independent nation, but was under Italy's control. When Menelik learned of this deception, he was furious. He had been tricked. He had offered a hand of friendship, and in return, Italy had tried to snatch his country's freedom. Menelik immediately wrote letters to the leaders of Europe, including the King of Italy, protesting this betrayal. He declared, "Ethiopia has need of no one. She stretches out her hands unto God." He made it clear that he would never accept a treaty that stripped his nation of its sovereignty. The Italians, however, refused to back down. They believed their military superiority would allow them to enforce their version of the treaty by force. They underestimated Menelik's resolve and the deep pride of the Ethiopian people. The line had been drawn in the sand. A conflict was now inevitable. Menelik began to mobilize his nation for a war to defend its very existence. The Italian government, confident in its technological superiority and colonial ambitions, decided to teach Menelik a lesson. They sent a large, well-equipped army into Ethiopia from their base in Eritrea. The Italian commander, General Oreste Baratieri, expected a swift and easy victory. He, like many Europeans at the time, held a deeply prejudiced view of African armies, considering them disorganized and poorly armed. He did not understand the land he was invading, or the people he was about to fight. He was marching into a trap, one set not by military genius alone, but by the fierce spirit of an entire nation. Menelik's call to arms resonated across the empire. From every province, from every village, warriors answered the call. Rasis, or regional lords, who had sometimes fought against each other, now marched side by side under the emperor's banner. It was a magnificent sight, a massive army, estimated at around 100,000 soldiers, gathering to defend their homeland. While many had modern rifles that Menelik had painstakingly acquired, others carried traditional spears and shields. They were united by a common cause to protect their freedom, their faith, and their emperor. Empress Taitu Batul, Menelik's brilliant and formidable wife, also marched with the army, inspiring the troops and helping to plan the strategy. The two armies converged near a town called Adwa, in the rugged mountains of the Tigray region. The Ethiopian forces knew this land intimately. They knew its hills, its valleys, and its hidden paths. The Italians, on the other hand, were in unfamiliar and difficult terrain, with poor maps and stretched supply lines. On March 1st, 1896, the battle began. The Italian forces, advancing in separate columns, became lost and separated in the confusing landscape. The Ethiopian army, guided by local knowledge and a brilliant battle plan, seized the opportunity. They fell upon the isolated Italian columns with overwhelming force and ferocious courage. The fighting was intense and brutal. The sound of rifles, cannons, and war cries echoed through the mountains. The Ethiopian soldiers, fighting on their own soil for their own liberty, fought with a passion the Italian soldiers could not match. By the end of the day, the battle was over. The modern, well-equipped Italian army had been decisively defeated. It was a catastrophic loss for Italy, and a stunning, almost unbelievable victory for Ethiopia. The mountains of Adwa had roared, and the world was shaken. The news of this victory would travel far beyond the battlefield, changing the course of history forever. The news of the Ethiopian victory at the Battle of Adwa spread like wildfire across the globe. In the capitals of Europe, there was shock and disbelief. A modern European army, a symbol of colonial power, had been crushed by an African force. It shattered the myth of European invincibility that had fueled the age of imperialism. For Italy, it was a national humiliation that led to the fall of its government. They were forced to sign a new treaty, the Treaty of Addis Ababa, which explicitly recognized the absolute independence of Ethiopia. Menelik had not only defended his nation, he had forced a European power to acknowledge its sovereignty on equal terms. For people of African descent all over the world, the victory at Adwa was a source of immense pride and inspiration. At a time when the entire continent of Africa, except for Ethiopia and Liberia, was falling under colonial rule, Adwa was a powerful symbol of resistance. It proved that Africans could defeat European armies and preserve their freedom. Black intellectuals, activists, and communities in the Americas, the Caribbean, and across Africa celebrated Ethiopia as a beacon of hope. It became a symbol of black pride and the dream of self-determination, fueling early Pan-African movements that called for unity and an end to colonial rule. The victory at Adwa had a profound psychological impact. Colonialism was not just about military and economic control, it was also built on the idea of racial and cultural superiority. The idea that Europeans were destined to rule over other peoples was widely accepted. Adwa challenged this racist ideology at its very core. It demonstrated that courage, strategy, and a powerful will to be free were not unique to any one race or continent. Ethiopia stood as a living testament to the fact that African civilizations were resilient and capable of defending themselves against even the most powerful aggressors. This single battle reshaped the global perception of Africa and colonialism. While the scramble for Africa continued elsewhere, Ethiopia's protected status sent a clear message. It showed that colonial expansion was not an unstoppable force of nature, it could be resisted and defeated. Menelik's Ethiopia became a symbol of what was possible when people unite to defend their land and their dignity. The echo of the victory at Adwa would continue to inspire future generations of freedom fighters across Africa and around the world, reminding them that the fight for liberty is always worth waging, no matter how great the odds. Emperor Menelik II's reign did not end with the Battle of Adwa. He continued to lead his nation for many more years, focusing on the modernization and consolidation he had started. He left behind a legacy that is woven into the very fabric of modern Ethiopia. He is remembered not just as a great warrior, but as a great unifier and a forward-thinking modernizer. He successfully brought together diverse peoples into a single, cohesive state, giving them a shared national identity and a common purpose. The infrastructure he built, the roads, the telegraph lines, the capital city of Addis Ababa, all became the framework for the nation's future development. His greatest legacy, however, is that of a defender of freedom. In an age when so many were silenced by the overwhelming force of colonialism, Menelik's roar was heard around the world. He stands as one of the most important figures in the history of African resistance. He proved that with strategic thinking, careful preparation, and unwavering unity, it was possible to defy an empire. His story became a powerful source of pride not only for Ethiopians, but for all people who value sovereignty and independence. He is the Lion of Shewa, who successfully guarded his home against the hunters of empire. The Ethiopian flag, with its iconic colors of green, yellow, and red, became a powerful symbol inspired by this legacy. These colors were adopted by many other African nations upon gaining their independence, as a tribute to Ethiopia's long history of sovereignty and its victory over colonialism. The green represents the fertile land, the yellow represents hope and peace, and the red represents the strength and the bloodshed in defense of the nation. When you see these colors, you are seeing a connection to Menelik's story and the enduring spirit of African independence that he so powerfully represented. Today, more than a century after his time, the story of Menelik II matters as much as ever. It is a timeless tale about the importance of unity in the face of external threats. It's a story about the wisdom of blending tradition with progress, of knowing who you are while also being open to new ideas. For anyone, anywhere, who faces a great challenge, Menelik's life offers a powerful lesson that courage, wisdom, and unity can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. He reminds us that freedom is a precious gift, one that must be cherished, protected, and, if necessary, fought for with all our might. If you want to discover more stories of African resilience and triumph, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Share this video to help spread Menelik II's legacy and inspire others with the enduring spirit of freedom. Thank you for being part of this journey.